He never expected a small wooden box to change anything in his life. It was something passed to him after his grandfather's things were sorted out, a simple object with faded carvings and a bit of dust stuck around the corners. At first he barely looked at it. He had no love for old items, and he didn't think classical music meant anything special. But the box felt different when he finally picked it up. It had weight, not just the kind that pulls the hand down, but a kind that makes the heart pause for a second. He placed it on his table and sat quietly for a moment. His home was always calm, but today it felt a little too quiet. He lifted the lid slowly, expecting maybe an old watch or a few coins. But inside there was only a small folded paper and a tiny metal key. Nothing about it looked expensive or rare, yet something inside him softened the moment he touched them. The paper opened with a soft crackle. The handwriting belonged to his grandfather, gentle and old-fashioned. The note said only one thing: "There are melodies you should hear at least once in your life. Start with this box." He didn't understand the meaning right away, raised an eyebrow, looked at the box again, and wondered why his grandfather thought classical music was so important. But something made him insert the key into the small slot on the side. He turned it carefully, and the gears inside produced a faint clicking sound. The moment he let go, the box released a slow, delicate tune. It wasn't loud, it wasn't perfect. The notes were soft, almost fragile, but together they created something warm. He sat back and just listened. The melody floated through the room, and suddenly everything around him felt strangely familiar. He didn't know the name of the tune, but he recognized the feeling it stirred inside him. It was the kind of sound that made old memories quietly rise, like resting water rippling when touched. A picture of his childhood flashed in his mind. He remembered sitting with his grandfather on a small balcony many years ago. He remembered the cool evenings, the smell of tea, the quiet laughter. He had forgotten those memories for so long that hearing them return made his chest tighten. He blinked very slowly, not sure if the melody was beautiful or just powerful enough to remind him of things he once left behind. When the tune stopped, the silence felt heavier than before. He looked at the box again, feeling a little confused and a little moved. He hadn't expected music to do this to him. He'd listened to songs in his life, sure, but never the kind that brought back emotions. He didn't even know were still inside him. He placed the note back on the table and picked it up again. He read it twice, then a third time. Something about the way his grandfather wrote the words made him feel that there was a hidden message in them. Maybe his grandfather wanted him to understand something he never talked about while he was alive. Maybe the music box was not just a gift. Maybe it was the start of something. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling for a few moments. He didn't know what to do next. Should he listen to the melody again? Should he find out what the tune was? Should he follow the note and look for more melodies? The questions hung in the air, but he didn't feel pressured. He just felt curious, and this curiosity was new to him. Later that night, while making tea, he found himself humming the melody without realizing it. The tune stuck to him in a gentle way, as if it didn't want to leave. He caught himself smiling at the thought, and it made him shake his head lightly. He didn't feel like someone who hums classical melodies in the kitchen, yet here he was, doing exactly that. He took his cup of tea and sat near the window. The sky was turning dark, and a quiet breeze moved through the curtains. He let the warmth of the tea rest in his hands and closed his eyes for a moment. The melody replayed in his mind, not perfectly, but enough for him to feel its softness again. He wondered how his grandfather discovered the tune in the first place. Grandfather always loved quiet music. Sometimes he would sit for long hours with his old record player, listening to pieces that seemed to slow down the entire world. But back then, the man never cared about those things. He would pass by and think it was just something old people enjoyed. Now he wished he had asked more questions, wished he had spent more time listening when he had the chance. He took another sip of tea and decided he would not let this feeling just fade away. The melody had opened something inside him, something he didn't want to close again. So he stood up, placed the cup on the counter, and went back to the music box. He turned the key again, more slowly this time, as if respecting the moment. The tune began once more. This time he listened with his eyes closed, let the sound fill the room and coat the walls with a gentle calm. He let the melody move inside his thoughts freely. He felt something peaceful, something almost comforting. And in that calmness, he realized something important. Maybe music wasn't just sound. Maybe it was a bridge. A bridge between memories, feelings, and time. A bridge between him and his grandfather. A bridge between who he was and who he could become. The melody faded again, leaving behind a soft silence. Out. But the silence didn't feel empty anymore. Out. It felt full of meaning. He carefully lifted the box and placed it on his shelf. He didn't know why, but he felt like this was where it belonged. Like it deserved a place where he could see it every day. As he stepped back, his eyes caught the note again. He picked it up and smiled slightly. He knew now that he would follow the words. He would discover the melodies his grandfather wrote about. But where to start? He wasn't someone who understood classical music. He didn't know composers or titles. He didn't know what made a melody great or unforgettable. He didn't even know where people found such music. Still, the curiosity inside him grew. It wasn't overwhelming. It was gentle, like the melody from the box. The next morning, after a quiet breakfast, he searched online for classical music beginners, often listened to. He wasn't trying to be an expert, just wanted something simple, something soft, something that could help him understand why his grandfather believed in these melodies so deeply. He pressed play on a recommended piece. The moment the first note played, his eyes widened slightly. This melody was completely different from the music box tune. It was richer, fuller, almost like waves moving from far away toward the shore. He sat down and listened. But as the melody grew, he felt something inside him shift again. This piece made him imagine things, colors, movements, light. It was like watching a silent story unfold without any words. He realized something he had never thought about before. Classical music didn't tell him what to feel. It allowed him to discover his own feelings. When the piece ended, he took a deep breath. He felt peaceful, yet thoughtful. He felt lighter, as if some burden he didn't know he carried had lifted just a little. He looked at the music box sitting on the shelf. He smiled softly. It all began with this small box and a simple note. The rest of the day, he found himself exploring more melodies. Some were slow, some were bright, some felt emotional, and some felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. He didn't understand all of them, and he didn't pretend to. But each piece left a mark on him, even if small. By evening, he felt different. He didn't know how to describe it exactly. It wasn't happiness or sadness. It was something deeper. A gentle understanding, maybe. A connection to something bigger than himself. He sat near his window again as night settled in. The air was cooler now. He held the music box in his hands and let his fingers brush over its old wooden surface. He thought about his grandfather, about the moments they shared long ago. He thought about the quiet evenings, the peaceful balcony, and the laughter that felt like warm light. He understood now why his grandfather loved these melodies. He understood why he wanted him to listen to them too. He leaned back and closed his eyes. The melody played in his mind again, even without the music box. And as he sat there, listening to the silence, shaped by memories and sound, he knew something clearly. This journey had just begun. He woke up with a strange sense of excitement the next morning, the kind he usually did not feel on an ordinary day. Normally, his mornings were quiet and simple. But after discovering how powerful the melodies felt, something inside him had shifted. It was as if the world around him had gained a new layer, something softer, something deeper, something worth paying attention to. He made breakfast slowly, letting his thoughts drift back to the tunes he had listened to the night before. They felt like new friends, gentle but meaningful, not demanding anything but offering comfort without words. Felt the same way when he listened to music alone on the balcony all those years ago. After eating, he sat on the couch with his phone and typed a few words into the search bar. Wasn't sure what exactly he was looking for. Maybe he wanted to learn more about the music box melody. Or maybe he simply wanted to listen to something that felt familiar yet new. Whatever it was, he knew he wanted to explore more. His search led him to a list of famous classical pieces people around the world admired. The list felt overwhelming at first, so many names, so many titles, so many stories behind each melody. But he reminded himself he didn't need to understand everything at once. He could start slowly, just like his grandfather must have. He clicked on one of the pieces recommended for beginners. As the music began to play, he leaned back into the couch. The first few seconds felt like someone slowly opening a curtain, letting warm light enter the room. The melody was gentle but confident, rising and falling like a calm conversation. He closed his eyes and let the sounds settle inside him. He could almost see something in his mind field, maybe with soft sunlight resting on the grass. He didn't know why the music created that image, but it felt peaceful. It felt human. As the piece continued, he realized something important. Classical music did not force him to imagine anything specific. It allowed his mind to travel freely, unhindered by words. It allowed him to understand emotions without anyone explaining them. When the piece ended, he felt like he had traveled far without leaving his living room. He sat quietly for a minute or two, absorbing the lingering calmness. Then he clicked on another melody. This one was different, faster, livelier. The notes jumped around like someone running joyfully through rain. It made him smile without even thinking. He never expected music without lyrics to feel so alive. For the next hour, he explored more melodies. Some were filled with deep emotion. Others were bright and cheerful. Some felt like old stories, and others felt like quiet reflections. Each one touched him in a different way, even the ones he didn't fully understand. Eventually, he decided he needed to experience this music in a place where it truly lived in real life, not just through headphones or a small speaker. He wanted to know what it felt like to hear these melodies the way musicians created them. After a bit of searching, he discovered a small local music hall. They were hosting a classical music evening in a few days. The event wasn't very formal and the ticket price was low. People from the community were invited to listen and enjoy without needing to know anything about classical music. He read the event description twice. A part of him hesitated. Would he feel out of place there? Would everyone else be more knowledgeable? Would he sit awkwardly, unsure of how to react? But then he remembered the note in the music box. He remembered how the tune reached inside him. He remembered the images the melodies created in his mind earlier that morning. Maybe this was exactly what his grandfather wanted him to experience. So he bought a ticket. The next few days felt a little different. He found himself thinking about the event, often not with nerves, but with a kind of gentle anticipation. Every now and then, he would replay the music box melody in his head, letting it calm him. At night, he played one new piece before sleeping. He didn't understand most of the history or technical parts, but he understood the feeling. And for now, that was enough. When the day of the event arrived, he dressed simply and reached the music hall early. The building was small but beautiful, with warm lights glowing through large windows. As he entered, he noticed people of all ages, some dressed casually, some a bit more formal, but all with a calm expression on their faces. He took a seat near the middle row, not too close, not too far. The hall felt peaceful, almost like a place built for quiet contemplation. The stage held only a few chairs, a grand piano, and some music stands. When the musicians walked onto the stage, the hall fell silent. They took their seats, adjusted their instruments gently, and exchanged small nods with one another. Then the first piece began. The moment the first note filled the room, his breath caught slightly. The sound was different from anything he had ever heard through speakers. It wasn't just louder. It was fuller, warmer, more alive. Each note felt like it had a heartbeat. Together, the instruments created a wave of sound that felt both powerful and delicate. He watched the musicians closely. Their expressions were calm, but their movements were full of emotion. It was like they were speaking a language he didn't understand, yet somehow he felt every word of it. The melody traveled around the hall, touching each listener in its own way. When he looked at the people sitting around him, he noticed something meaningful. Even though no one said anything, everyone felt connected through the same sound. He closed his eyes for a few moments and let the music wash over him. It reminded him of moments in life that he had forgotten, quiet mornings. Old conversations, small joys he once thought didn't matter. When the piece ended, the hall echoed with gentle applause. He joined in, feeling grateful for being there. The next few pieces created different emotions. Some felt heavy and dramatic, almost like a storm passing overhead. Others felt calm and sweet, like a soft breeze on a warm day. Each melody told a story without needing any words. He found himself reacting more deeply than he expected. About halfway through the event, the pianist played a solo piece. The hall dimmed slightly, and all eyes turned toward the piano. The pianist began with soft, slow notes that soon bloomed into something rich and emotional. Every rise and fall felt like a breath, like a heartbeat. He felt something warm move through his chest. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't joy. It was something in between, something gentle. Something honest. He wished he could thank the musician personally for creating that moment. By the time the event ended, he felt like a different version of himself. Not changed completely, but opened up. More aware of how strongly music could affect a person, he walked out of the hall slowly, taking in the night air. The sky was dark, but the streetlights made everything look peaceful. People were leaving in small groups, talking softly, smiling quietly. He didn't talk to anyone, but he didn't feel alone. He felt part of something bigger. As he walked home, he realized he wanted to learn more. Maybe not in a technical way, but in a human way. He wanted to understand why some melodies felt like sunlight and others felt like rain. He wanted to know why his grandfather believed these melodies were important, and most of all, he wanted to keep exploring. When he reached home, he placed the music box on his table. He touched the small key gently, then turned it once. The melody began again, soft, fragile, familiar. This time, he didn't just hear it, he understood it. He sat quietly, letting the sound settle into his heart. And in that moment, he knew something clearly. The journey he started was not just about music. It was about finding parts of himself he had never known before, and he was ready to continue. He woke up the next day feeling lighter than usual, as if the music from the night before still lingered somewhere inside him. It wasn't a dramatic change, not something he could point at and explain clearly. It was something small, soft, almost like a shift in the way his heart felt when he opened his eyes. He didn't rush out of bed. He stayed still for a few breaths, letting the morning silence settle on him. There was something peaceful about the room, something different from other mornings. And when he finally stood up, the first thing he did was look at the music box sitting quietly on his shelf. It felt strange how a simple wooden box had become such an important part of his days. He touched it gently, but he didn't open it yet. A part of him wanted to save the melody for later. The same way someone might save a special moment instead of rushing into it. He made breakfast slowly, thinking about the concert again, the musicians, the hall. The feeling of sitting among strangers who were touched by the same sounds. He had never felt that kind of connection before, a connection made without any conversation, without knowing names or stories. Just sound. Just shared silence. After eating, he sat near the window with his tea and opened his phone. He searched for more classical pieces, not because he wanted to become an expert, but because he was simply curious. Curious about what other feelings music could unlock. He found a playlist labeled Melodies for Peaceful Mornings. It sounded simple enough, so he pressed play. The first tune was slow and calm, flowing like water over smooth stones. As he listened, he stared outside at the quiet street. A few people walked by, some heading to work, others taking morning strolls. Nothing unusual, yet everything looked a little softer, as if the music made the world around him breathe slowly. He took a sip of tea and let the tune settle into his mind. It made him think of moments he had always ignored, small things like the warmth of sunlight on his arm, the quiet rustle of the curtains, the distant sound of someone sweeping their front yard. These little moments, usually unnoticed, now felt meaningful. He wondered if that was the magic of classical music. Maybe it didn't just fill the air with sound. Maybe it taught people how to notice life again. After finishing his tea, he decided to take a walk. The weather was nice, warm, but not uncomfortable. He put his headphones on and let the playlist continue as he stepped outside. The combination of fresh air and soft music made the walk feel almost dreamlike. As he walked past familiar streets, something interesting happened. The melodies seemed to change how he saw ordinary things. The sound of a piano made a simple tree look more peaceful. A gentle violin made a passing car feel less distracting. Every step felt more connected to his surroundings. He reached a small park and sat on one of the empty benches. Children played on the swings, their laughter faint but clear. A few older people walked slowly on the paths, some alone, some talking softly with friends. The music in his ears blended with the natural sounds around him, and together they created a moment of calm he didn't want to let go of. He closed his eyes for a minute and took a slow breath. The melody flowing through his headphones reminded him of his grandfather again, in a painful way, but in a warm, comforting way. He remembered the quiet evenings they spent together, the simple conversations, the silent moments that never felt awkward. He wondered if his grandfather ever imagined that the music box would lead him here. Sitting in a park, feeling connected to life in a way he never felt before. When he opened his eyes, he noticed a small music shop across the street. It was an old building with faded paint, but a warm glow inside. A sign on the door said Vintage Records and Music Books. He hesitated for only a moment before standing up and walking toward it. The shop smelled like old paper and wooden shelves. Rows of records lined the walls, each one carrying stories from different years, different places. A soft tune played from a speaker in the corner. Something gentle and familiar. He walked slowly through the aisles, not sure what he was looking for. He wasn't even sure if he wanted to buy anything. He just wanted to be around music. He wanted to understand more about the world his grandfather once loved. As he browsed, he noticed something interesting. The shop wasn't crowded, but the few people inside moved with a calmness he didn't often see in other places. They seemed peaceful. Almost like the music had touched them too. He picked up a record with a simple cover. Nothing fancy. Just a picture of a piano and a few notes scribbled around it. He turned it over and read the small description. It talked about melodies meant to reflect life's quiet moments. Something about those words spoke to him. He placed the record back and continued exploring. But those words stayed with him. After a while, he found a small book tucked between two larger ones. The title was about understanding classical music in simple terms. He flipped through it and saw short explanations about composers, instruments, and how to listen with an open heart rather than a trained mind. He didn't buy the book either. He wasn't ready for explanations yet. He wanted to feel the music first. As he walked toward the door to leave, he noticed a small basket near the counter filled with used CDs. One of them caught his eye. It had no title on the front, just a picture of an old music box. He froze for a moment. He picked it up slowly and turned it over. The back listed a collection of gentle melodies meant for memory and reflection. He didn't know any of the titles, but he didn't need to. He bought it without thinking too much. When he walked outside, the sunlight felt warmer. He held the CD in his hand, feeling an odd sense of connection to it. Maybe it was the picture on the front. Maybe it was the idea that the melodies inside were chosen with care. Or maybe it was the feeling that this was part of the journey he had unknowingly started. He went home and placed the CD next to the music box on his shelf. The two objects looked strangely perfect together, like they belonged in the same space. He didn't listen to the CD right away. Instead, he spent the afternoon cleaning his home slowly, letting the earlier melodies from the playlist play in the background. Every corner of his home felt different now, because anything had changed physically, but because he had changed. Later, as the sun began to set, he finally took the CD, placed it into an old player he rarely used, and pressed play. The first melody began softly, almost like a whisper. It wasn't like the music box tune or the pieces he heard at the concert. It was something in the middle, quiet but steady, delicate but confident. As it played, he sat on the floor, leaning against the couch. The room grew warmer, not from temperature, but from the feeling the music brought with it. Each note seemed to reach into his memories gently, touching moments he hadn't thought about in years. Times he felt lost, times he felt hopeful, times he felt nothing at all. He closed his eyes and let the melody travel through him. It didn't hurt. It didn't overwhelm. It just allowed him to feel, truly feel. When the melody ended, he stayed still for a long time. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He didn't even open his eyes. He realized something important. Music had become a companion, not a replacement for people, not a distraction from life, but a quiet friend that helped him understand himself. He opened his eyes slowly and looked around his room. It felt like a different place. It was filled with warmth and gentle understanding. He touched the music box again and smiled slightly. It all began with this small, old object hand. Now here he was, discovering the world in a way he never expected. He knew he couldn't stop now. He wanted to keep exploring, keep feeling, keep discovering the melodies his grandfather believed were worth hearing once in a lifetime. He leaned back and let the next track begin, and as the room filled with another, gentle tune, he felt ready for wherever this journey would take him next. He didn't plan to share music with anyone. In fact, the idea never crossed his mind at first. This journey felt personal, something growing quietly inside him, something too gentle to talk about out loud. But as days passed and melodies continued to shape his moods, he found himself wishing others could feel what he felt. It started in small ways. When people around him seemed stressed or tired, he wondered if a soft tune could calm them the way it calmed him. When someone shared a story about a difficult day, he wondered if certain melodies could help them breathe a little easier. He didn't think of himself as someone who could offer advice or fix problems, but music seemed like something that could sit beside a person without asking anything of them. The idea of inviting people over came slowly. It wasn't something he decided in one moment. It grew over several days, like a quiet suggestion that wouldn't leave. One evening, as he sat near his window listening to a gentle piano melody, he looked at the lights glowing in the neighboring homes. He wondered what kind of days those people had lived. Were they tired? Were they happy? Were they carrying small burdens inside their hearts the way he once did without realizing it? He didn't know, but he wished they could hear what he was hearing. That thought stayed with him all night. And the next morning, he made a simple decision. He would invite a few neighbors and friends for a small evening gathering. Nothing big, nothing formal. Just a quiet time to share music. He hesitated before sending any messages. What if people didn't like classical music? What if they found it boring? What if they thought it was unusual? He almost deleted the message twice before finally hitting send. He invited only a few people, those who lived nearby or had spoken to him recently. He didn't promise anything fancy. He only said they would sit together, have tea, and listen to some melodies that meant something to him. Then he waited. To his surprise, the responses came quickly. A couple of neighbors said they'd love to come. One person said they didn't know much about classical music, but were curious. Someone else said they hadn't been to anything calm or quiet in a long time, and his chest felt lighter when he read those messages. Maybe people needed calmness more than he realized. When the evening arrived, he prepared simple snacks and made a large pot of tea. He cleaned the living room and arranged the chairs in a circle so everyone could face each other. He placed the music box on the shelf, not as the main focus, but as a quiet reminder of where all this began. He created a small playlist of the melodies that had touched him, the most pieces that were soft enough for beginners, warm enough for conversation, and meaningful enough to leave an impression. When the doorbell rang for the first time, he felt a small flutter in his stomach. He opened the door to find his neighbor smiling warmly. "Thank you for inviting me," the neighbor said. He nodded, a little shy, but genuinely glad to see someone arrive. Slowly, more people came. Some brought snacks, others brought simple gifts like fruit or biscuits. They filled the living room with soft conversations and gentle laughter. The mood felt natural, warm, and surprisingly easy. When everyone settled, he cleared his throat lightly, not to give a speech, but to explain things simply. "I've been listening to some classical music lately," he said quietly. "It has helped me understand things I didn't know I needed to understand. So I thought maybe we could listen together tonight. Nothing complicated. Just a calm evening." People nodded, some smiling, some curious. He pressed play. The first melody began softly. Heads tilted slightly in attention. Shoulders relaxed. Faces softened. It was a slow tune, gentle enough to enter the room without asking for any reaction. At first, people listened quietly. Some closed their eyes. Some watched the floor. Some simply breathed a little deeper. He saw that the music worked differently on each person, just like it worked on him when the first piece ended. There was a moment of silence, not awkward, but peaceful. "That was beautiful," someone murmured. Another person nodded. It felt soothing, like the kind of sound you need after a long day. He smiled softly. He wasn't expecting reactions, but hearing them made his chest warm. The next melody played, then another. As the evening continued, something interesting happened. People began sharing small stories from their lives. Not dramatic ones, but simple moments, memories from childhood. Quiet struggles they kept to themselves, things they wished they could slow down. The music seemed to open a space inside the room, a space where people could speak honestly without feeling judged. No one talked over the melodies. They let the music guide the pace of conversation. Someone said the tune reminded them of a moment long ago when they sat with their father on a rooftop during a blackout, looking at stars. Someone else said they felt like the music carried a sense of hope they hadn't felt in a long time. He listened quietly, grateful that the melodies he discovered alone were now touching others. At one point, a neighbor looked at the shelf and noticed the small wooden music box. They asked about it. He hesitated at first. The music box felt personal, something connected deeply to his grandfather. But he realized sharing this part of the story was part of the journey, so he told them. He told them about receiving the box after his grandfather passed away. He told them about the note inside. He told them how the first melody opened something inside him that had been closed for years. As he spoke, he didn't try to sound poetic or emotional. He spoke in simple words, the same way he felt inside. When he finished sharing, the room grew quiet again, not sad, not heavy, just thoughtful, someone whispered. "That's really beautiful," another person said. "It makes sense now. Why tonight feels different." He didn't answer. He simply smiled. The evening continued with more melodies, more soft conversations, more moments of shared quiet. By the time the gathering ended, people thanked him again, because the event was fancy, but because it was calm, warm, and honest. One person said, "I didn't know classical music could make you feel so much without saying anything." Another said, "Please do this again. It's been a long time since I've felt this peaceful." After everyone left, he stood in the doorway for a while, watching the empty street. The silence outside felt different now, and empty, but filled with the gentle memories of the evening. He closed the door and walked to the shelf. He picked up the music box and turned the small key. The melody filled the room again, tender and familiar. He sat on his couch, thinking about how something so small had brought people together. Something simple. Something honest. He realized that sharing music didn't take away its meaning. It made it richer, more alive. Over the next few weeks, the small gathering quietly became a tradition. Not every week, not on a strict schedule. People would ask him when the next one would be, and he would say he'd let them know soon. And when he felt the right mood, he would invite them again. Each gathering was different. Sometimes more people came, sometimes fewer. Sometimes the group sat in deep silence, listening. Other times they shared stories or discussed what the melodies made them feel. Slowly, something changed in the neighborhood. People started greeting each other more warmly. Conversations became a little deeper. Even the quiet moments between them felt softer, and he realized something important. Music had not only changed him, it had changed the world around him. It had become a bridge between neighbors, between strangers, between moments that once passed unnoticed. One evening, after everyone left again, he sat alone with the music box resting on his lap. He turned the key and let the melody play. He closed his eyes and felt a gentle warmth in his chest. It reminded him of something he had almost forgotten: how deeply his grandfather cared for him. The music box wasn't just a gift. It was a reminder to slow down, a reminder to feel, a reminder to notice life. He touched the lid gently. feeling the old wooden texture under his fingers. He knew now that this journey wasn't just about experiencing melodies once. It was about discovering parts of life he had overlooked for years, and he was grateful, more grateful than he could ever put into words as the melody faded into silence. He opened his eyes slowly. He wasn't alone. He never truly was. He had people around him, melodies inside him, and memories guiding him, and he knew one thing clearly. The journey was far from over. He sat near the window that evening, the same spot where he had been listening to music for months now. The room felt peaceful, almost like the melodies had softened the walls themselves over time. Outside, the light of the setting sun touched the trees in gentle shades, and as he watched the sky slowly turn from orange to blue, he played the melody that always reminded him of his grandfather. It was slow and warm, rising and falling like a quiet breath. He closed his eyes and let the sound settle into him. Every note carried something familiar, something he could not fully explain but could feel deeply. It was like remembering a moment that he had never lived but still understood. Over the months, he had listened to so many classical pieces from different composers, but this melody always touched him in a way nothing else could. Maybe it was because it came from a memory. Maybe it was because it came from someone he loved, as the music played. He thought about how much had changed since the day he opened that old music box. Back then, he had not even cared about classical music. He had simply looked at the list left behind in the small envelope, expecting nothing special. But the journey that followed changed everything. He still remembered the first moment he felt music pull something inside him, a feeling close to calm, but also close to hope. Now, a month later, he could not imagine his life without these melodies. They'd become part of his days and his nights. He played them in the morning while making tea, during long walks, and while resting after tiring days. Each melody had taught him something different. Some taught him patience. Some helped him think clearly. Some reminded him to breathe. Some reminded him to forgive. He smiled as he thought of all the people he had met along the way. The young violinist practicing in the quiet corner of the library, the old couple who still attended every local concert hand in hand, the shopkeeper who introduced him to rare recordings, the neighbors who had started joining his music evenings every month. None of them knew each other before, but music had connected them in a simple and natural way. Those gatherings had grown slowly. At first, only 2 people came, then 4, then 10. Soon, the small living room was full of people sitting on chairs, on cushions, even by the window. They would listen to a melody, then share how it made them feel. Sometimes, someone laughed. Sometimes someone cried softly. Sometimes they just sat in silence together. It felt safe, warm, and human. He never planned to start something like that. It just happened because music had touched him, and he wanted others to feel it too. The world outside was always rushing, always talking, always noisy. But here in that small living room, people could breathe. They could close their eyes and let a melody paint a moment inside them. As he sat listening that evening, wondered what his grandfather would think if he could see him now. The old man had always believed that music could teach a person things no book ever could. He used to say that a melody shows you life in a way words sometimes cannot. At that time, those words had made little sense to him. Now they made perfect sense. He opened the journal he had been writing in for weeks. It was a simple notebook with a plain cover, nothing fancy. Inside, he had written the name of each melody that had changed something in him. Under each name, he wrote a short note explaining what the melody meant to him, how it made him feel, or what memory it carried. Some pages were filled with long lines. Some pages had only one sentence. Some pages had only one word, he wrote slowly, carefully, trying to capture the feeling he carried. The journal was not something he planned to publish or share widely. He wanted it to be something personal, something that someone else might discover many years later. It's the same way he discovered the message in his grandfather's music box. Maybe one day someone would open it and start a journey of their own, just like he had. After writing for a while, he put the journal aside and closed his eyes again. The melody was still playing softly, filling the room like warm light. He felt a soft heaviness behind his eyes, the kind that comes not from sadness but from gratitude. He was grateful for the music, for the people he had met, for the quiet moments, for the way life had opened in front of him in small, gentle steps. His thoughts drifted to the first time he played classical music at a gathering. He had been nervous back then, unsure if anyone would understand why he loved the melodies so much. But the moment the first note filled the room, everything became clear. The room softened, the people relaxed, and the melody did what words could not. It reached every person in a different way, but somehow connected them all. He remembered watching everyone's faces as they listened. Some had their eyes closed. Some had a small smile. Some simply stared at the floor, lost in thought. He realized then that music is like a mirror. It reflects something inside each person, even things they didn't know they were holding. That moment had stayed with him ever since. The sun had gone down completely now, and the room was lit only by the small lamp near the table. The soft yellow glow made everything look calm and familiar. He walked to the shelf where he kept the music box. He opened it gently, running his fingers along the small carvings on the lid. The mechanism inside was old, but it still worked. When he turned the key, the simple tune began to play, the same tune he had heard as a child. It wasn't famous. It wasn't a masterpiece. But it carried a memory that no orchestra could perform. He listened to it with a slow breath, feeling the weight of all the months that had passed. He sat down again, this time placing the music box beside him. The soft mechanical melody blended with the classical piece still playing in the background, and the two together made a strange but comforting harmony. It felt almost symbolic, the old melody of his past and the new melodies he had discovered meeting in the same moment. He wondered how many people walked through life without ever hearing these melodies. Not because they avoided them, but because no one ever showed them the way. He thought about the people in his gatherings and how their eyes lit up the first time they heard certain pieces. He remembered one person saying they felt like they were seeing a memory they had never lived. Another said they felt like the world had paused for a moment. Those words stayed with him. He had learned that music did not need to be understood. It only needed to be felt. And once a person felt it, something inside them changed quietly. After a long moment, he reached for his journal again and wrote a few more lines. He wrote about how music helped him appreciate silence, how it made simple moments feel more special, how it helped him slow down when life felt too fast. He wrote that every melody he heard showed him a different shade of life. Then he wrote one last sentence. Some melodies stay with you forever, even when the music stops. As he closed the journal, he felt a gentle sense of completion. Not an ending, but a calm acceptance that the journey had become part of him. He knew he would keep listening to new melodies, keep learning, keep feeling. But this chapter, the one that began with the small music box, had reached its quiet end. He picked up the music box one more time, held it close for a moment, and smiled softly. It had carried a message across generations, and now he had written his own message for someone else, someone he might never meet. The room was quiet now, except for the soft rustling of the night breeze coming through the window. He looked around and felt grateful for the life he had lived, the people he had met, and the melodies that had shaped his days. He stood up and walked to the window, watching the calm night outside. Somewhere in the distance, a soft sound of wind moved through the trees. He breathed slowly, feeling light, feeling present. He knew that life would continue with its rush, its noise, its worries. But he also knew that whenever he needed peace, understanding, or clarity, he could simply return to the melodies that had once opened his heart. And so, with the night wrapped around him like a soft blanket, he let the final notes fade into the quiet room, carrying the feeling with him, feeling he knew would stay for the rest of his life.